My name is Nava Milliken, and I'm the Executive Director and Chief Curator of the Museum for Art in Wood. And we are here in the midst of the installation of A Plank in a Shipwreck, Warpwood 2025. This year we were joined by 6 artists and 1 scholar from around the world. This is the 28th iteration of the Residency program, which was formerly known as the International Turning Exchange. And since 2022, we've been bringing artists here annually every summer under the name of the Windgate Arts Residency program in Wood. The 6 artists and 1 scholar that joined us this year come from 5 countries and 3 continents around the world. It was truly an international gathering of artists who are dedicated to this material. And as you can see in the exhibition, they brought with them a wide range of approaches to the material. We have marketry, we have sculpture, we have sculptural furniture, we have relational aesthetics and performance, community outreach, and everything in between. So it's a really outstanding collection of artworks made during the 2-month period of the residency.
My name is Klara Knutsson. I'm from Sweden and I currently live and work in Stockholm, Sweden. I do marketry work, which is a technique where you use veneer to do images. Yeah, I've always been drawing and I was into painting too. And then I studied cabinet making. So marketry for me was just like the perfect mix of drawing and painting and woodworking. Marketry is a quite old, traditional technique. It was way more common a while back. I do a lot of botanical motifs, and that comes mostly as an inspiration from the traditional marketry. And I also get a lot of inspiration from the material in itself. Like the wood can be such a beautiful thing, and I want to use that in the best way and enhance the natural beauty in the wood. I've made 12 pieces, and they are quite small. They're 30 by 30 centimeters, and they will be placed next to each other. So some lines and some motifs continue on into the pieces next to it, but they are also separate images that work individually. I've taken a lot of photos just around Philadelphia of buildings and things that I found interesting and would like to translate into my pieces. But also I drew inspiration from Philadelphia being such a giant puzzle with all different people and buildings and stories and patterns. Yeah, it's like a huge collage. So I thought that was inspiring, and I decided to make smaller pieces of marketry that together make up a larger image. And I feel like that's a translation of what being in a big city like this feels like. So the process has been a bit different. I did a rough sketch digitally, and then I made the final sketches. But I didn't finish them all in the beginning, so I actually started making the pieces before I knew exactly what all of them would look like, and that's a different way of working for me. I wanted to be open to let this time here also change what the final pieces would look like, so I didn't want to do all the sketching the first week. What I like about marketry is that you get to use different veneers, like different types of wood, and use all the patterns and the grain to make up depth and create your images. So veneer is very thin sheets of wood. This that I work with is 0.6 millimeters, and you usually use them in furniture or interior where you cover up, for example, plywood or MDF boards with veneer on top. So I ordered a variety pack of veneer before I arrived here, so I didn't know exactly what I would be working with. And it's been exciting because I don't recognize all of these species. Some of them are different than what I've seen before back in Sweden, so that's also been fun to just experience and work with new wood species that I haven't seen before.
My name is Edgar Orlaineta. I am a visual artist from Mexico. I work a lot with the history of industrial design. I produce objects from scratch, I recreate objects, I intervene objects, so all the things around the objects and the combination of those. I depict motifs from books or archives or even objects that I like, and then I develop projects from there. I get bored really easily, but then I have these lines that are constant, and that allows me to work even if I don't have an idea. I just go into the wood shop and start turning something, and then eventually it becomes an idea, and I develop a project from there. I thought of doing this really quiet project of just turning bowls, very simple shapes. But then I saw all the resources and all the machines, and I had plenty of time, so I did several things. But one of the pieces had like 3 bowls, and I also made a little bowl. So I think the bowl is quite archetypical shape now. It was probably one of the first things that humanity made. I think there is something precious on them, and I'm quite animistic. Like, I believe they have a spirit. I work a lot with the lathe. I produce small elements that go into the big sculptures. I also work a lot with gouges, carving. Then I also work with odds and ends and pieces that people throw away. I make these accumulations of wood, and I make compositions. So sometimes I add the book that I'm actually reading, or I get inspired by the book, and it goes along with the piece. Or sometimes the piece asks me for a kind of motive, and then I have to find a book or put a book that I already have that creates a dialogue. And I like that kind of connections. One of the pieces is called Atomic Kachina, and it has to do with the bombing of sacred land. A lot of the first atomic tests in the United States were made in sacred land. So I'm playing with that because now we're again threatened by atomic fear. And the other one is called Masked Art and Use. It comes from the book that I selected. So it also has to do with identity. I think sometimes we wear masks, but also a mask is how you develop your identity. So maybe a mask is not that far from reality. I think all of our life we are creating this personality or entity. So even if we build it up, it's probably honest or truth. You learn so much from working with wood. Wood has its own resistance. If you don't work in the right way, you won't get anywhere. So it's always a dialogue. It also teaches you humbleness, because it's not the computer that you just push a button and then it's done, you know. And I think it's very relevant nowadays with all this technology. I think working with hands is going to become like something quite radical, and it's quite an amazing feeling just to suddenly have created something, you know. People take it for granted, but it's a big deal.
My name is Nifemi Ogunro. I was born in Lyon, France, and I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. The type of work that I do revolves a lot around the body, as well as movement, and particularly perception. So I would define my style as functional sculpture. So they really are meant to be interacted with. They're meant to hold a body. So I have furniture tendencies, but I'm also looking at the practice from an artful lens as well. So I want the work to exist and serve a function, but also be a sculpture on their own. The medium that I work in is wood, and I was always curious about the fact that wood itself grows naturally, very organically. But then when it's milled, we now are working with planes. So I like to take wood as a material and bring it back to its organic nature through the forms that I choose, whether it's a soft curve, whether it's through like bending, whether it's through like creating angles and the illusion of this organic being. Right now I'm really excited about bendable plywoods, just the possibility of bendable plywoods and the scale that I can work with. They come in 8 feet by 4 feet, and I can use one sheet and create like a massive, really beautiful sculpture. So that's exciting to me, to be able to use scale in my work. So I'm working on a few things, but the main piece, they're just large curves. There are 4 in total. The 2 big curves are 5 feet long by 33 inches tall, 2 feet wide. And then the smaller ones are about 3 feet long, 2 feet wide. And they're meant to almost nestle each other and create this illusion of chaos and collapse. So they're like leaning on each other in untraditional ways. Some are on their sides, some are upright. I found that using bendable plywood just helped me achieve tighter curves that if I were to steam bend it, it would be much more difficult. I pretty much create the interior form that I want and then I stack plywood over it. 2 layers usually is not strong enough to withstand, like it'll break. So the more layers that you add, the stronger your form becomes. I'm stacking the layers one by one and watching a lot of glue dry. The fun part is routing the edges and then sanding and kind of getting it finished, but it's a pretty sloppy process. It doesn't look beautiful until like 3 days before it's done. But being around the fellows is really inspiring because it almost feels like you're being pushed to explore in different ways. All of our processes are so different, so you really feel like this push to want to do more. So I'm working with a lot of like hand tools for some smaller concepts. I've always wanted to work with more found woods, but I'm in New York. That's just not really as accessible. So working with the material itself and working with its imperfections is really exciting to me. And I feel like that's not something I get an opportunity to do.
My name is Asem Kamal. I am a YouTuber and a maker from Cairo, Egypt. I have my own workshop in Cairo, so I am a YouTuber. That's my full-time job. My work is basically telling stories through crafts and making. So I have an idea and I start making the product and film it to share it with the people on YouTube and all the platforms. I used to work as an animator and illustrator, so I have an animation background. I love to watch a lot of YouTube videos about crafts and woodworking. Until one day I decided to buy some basic tools and made something. And then because I have a camera, I started filming everything. And after a lot of time, I became like a YouTuber. I think making stuff is in the nature of every human being. And I just feel like natural when I make stuff. The fact of that you can create something out of nothing, for me, it's very satisfying. So at the beginning, it was a bit challenging being the documentary artist because, yes, I document my work in a video format. But when I came here, one of the things that I don't want to do is like to take the camera and start shooting films. I want to do something like physical and tangible. So my project is a flip book machine. The machine is basically like a screen, but it's all analog. There is nothing digital about it. So it's like 24 flaps that hand cranked to create like 1 second of a video. I make boxes for each artist, and what I'm doing now is like I'm trying to observe each artist, watching him working and see, okay, this is like the perfect second to film him in his element. For example, Edgar is always carving, so I always watch him doing this with the mallet and the chisel. So I just take a video of him doing this. So other artists, each one in his own element. Because I am the documentary artist, I observe a lot. Like sometimes I don't work. I'm just keep walking around everyone, just watching them. Sometimes it's annoying just to be like this for everyone. But yeah, sometimes I just go observe everyone how he or she working, and until I get the idea. Yeah. After I get the idea, I do a lot of prototypes with very cheap materials to like as a proof of concept to make sure that this product is viable and it could be done. I printed the photos, but I wanted to add more like manual or sketchy element to the video. So I put some marker like oil painting marker and trying to add some effects for each video. I made one of these flipbox machine way like 5 years ago when I was just starting and learning how to do woodworking, but it was very clumsy and wasn't good at all. So I just dedicated these 2 months to do prototypes and try, okay, the mechanism, this work, okay, I don't need it to go back, so I have to think of another mechanism. So I did a lot of testing. I did some research and I asked some people, okay, how to solve that. So a lot of people told me, okay, you have to make like, I don't know the name of the mechanism, but it's some sort of gears and some sort of part that prevent it from going back. So it's really fun just dedicating time for something that you want to try, because I always wanted to do like something mechanical.
I'm Alan Laing, and I'm an artist from South Africa, from Pretoria, the capital city there. So generally my work takes the form of contraptions or tools or apparatuses, things that have some kind of function within my life, but the function tends to be absurd or magical or ritual, something like that. So in general, I work with found wood, and I think of my process as a collaboration. So I don't try to force the wood into a shape that I want as much as finding a shape that's already close to what I need. For me, there's this magical aspect to wood that it allows things to change. So that's also why I'm drawn to like ideas of shamanism and mythology. It's that things can transform from one thing into another. The tagline that I like to say is that wood solves problems, and I thought I want to share that with other people. And so I thought I'll call myself the Xylomantis, and that the Xylomantis makes xylomedicine for people to make their dreams come true or resolve whichever problem they have, where I would usually create small sculptures that I would give to people as a gift. I've decided that here I'd rather create a book, because that's something that I can leave behind, and it's more of sort of an archive of people's story. The xylomancy that I've done in South Africa was very much about one person telling me a problem or a wish or a dream. But for this residency, I've framed the question a bit differently, and I just asked them to tell me their story, whatever that might be. So they had the option of telling me a fictional narrative, telling me about their own life, and based on the story that the person has told me, I'll make a selection of different symbols that seem relevant or appropriate. And then I'll, in discussion with the storyteller, I'll explain to them why I've chosen a particular composition and hear from them whether they agree that that sort of reflects their story. You know, this, for example, is a representation of a digging stick from rock art in South Africa. The digging stick is something that women would use as part of their gathering process. So it would have associations of like femininity or associations of almost agriculture nurturing. Another symbol that I really love, this would be a shaman who's in the process of transforming from a human into an animal. It's got the legs and body of a human, but it's got the face of an antelope. And the antelope face is bleeding from the nose, and the human body is hunched over at the middle. And they do this by dancing around the fire until their stomach begins to cramp up and they feel the magic boiling inside of them. That's when they know that they've actually broken through into the trance realm. And in that way, they'd be able to support their community and help them with their various requests. With the finished product, I've created 16 pages. At any given point, as the viewer pages through the book, the combination of 4 stories and the meta-narrative that exists is going to change. So it's this continuous process of the story emerging. And then in addition to that, I've made a couple of other contraptions that are also going to solve some of the problems. And I think one of the most obvious problems we have at the moment is this idea of polarization. This piece behind me, 2 people could stand on either side of this ladder across from one another, and then the idea is that they can clasp each other's arms across this bit of wood, and then they can just have sort of a face-to-face conversation. And so it's got this adjustable height, and then it's also got this ball joint to allow them to, you know, accommodate both of them. The mask that I made, I was hoping to be able to wear it while I was doing my performance, but it's just a bit too impractical for me to wear. When you're actually trying to make intricate little artworks, it's not quite as comfortable as I was hoping. But all human societies have used masks at some point in their cultural, you know, changing and so on, because it allows your viewer to suspend their disbelief. They can imagine that even though you're a human, you're also someone else.
My name is Arden, and I was raised in Kentucky. I spent the majority of my life there, and now I live in Arkansas, and I'm working a lot in sculptural woodworking. For most of my work in general, I've pulled from the domestic and pastoral landscape, so objects that you would find in the home or that have like sort of a more rural, traditional narrative to them. Here, I've wanted to like lean more into the dreamscape, so I'm definitely exploring these worlds of functional and abstract. One of the favorite things I'm making is a chair, and it's adapted from the Appalachian and Ozark style of stick chair making. The chair back is a tree fork that I pulled from the Delaware River upon arriving here, and then I've carved the tree fork down into a wishbone shape. So I really like the conversation that the chair creates of rest and labor and wishing. And the other works are more abstract in nature. I do like hold an ethic of making that through each piece where I never use hardware. I'm trying to use like a more traditional joinery methods. I never leave an edge perfect, and I don't leave a perfect plane. Everything is like more organic in its shape. The tools I use generally involve more hand tools, so I'll use draw knives, carving tools, hand saws. Well, I like the physicality of the making. Even though it's not as accessible, it does afford me a certain surface where everything is feels like it's been touched by hand. A lot of the works that I've done throughout my history of art making are more remakes of ready-made objects. And so I wanted to get outside of that zone of making and try to explore things that come from the internal or the conscious, that don't necessarily have a like very premeditated existence. One of the works is a large plank, and it's titled Desire Field Unfolded, and there are sculptural elements added to it to make it feel like a landscape, like there's a fence line, a checkerboard, a ladder. The plank is carved in a way that there's some arrivals and exits. I didn't have the work completely fleshed out before I arrived to Philadelphia. It was a big turning point for me to work in a highly populated city and co-op space, because generally I'm working in a quiet shop like somewhere in Arkansas in the mountains. I feel like a lot of the pieces are influenced by being in a completely different space and state of mind, which is the nice part of being in a residency, because you get to explore a different facet of your practice.
My name is Holly Gore. I am an art historian and curator. I live and work in Chester County, where I am the director of interpretation and associate curator at the Wharton Esherick Museum in Malvern, which is a hand-built artist's home and studio. During the fellowship, I proposed a project that would be one part art historical research and another part working with the contemporary artists in the program. For the part of my project that involved historical research, I went into the archives of the Museum for Art in Wood, so looking back over the residency from its origins in the 1990s as a program that supported woodturners. So looking through photographs, looking through the different forms of documentation that existed there, looking at kind of oral history interview type things, anything to see how the program has changed, but I think more interestingly to me, those things that have persisted, things like the emphasis on going to get salvaged wood, because wood turning can be very close to the tree. And even though wood turning is one of many media that the artists use, there's still that very early moment where the museum rents a truck for them and they go and they pick up these salvaged pieces, which you can see all throughout the works there. So it's kind of interesting to me to see these kinds of early infrastructure that supports one kind of work persisting and adapting and changing as the work shifts over the years. I spent a lot of my time over at NextFab, where the artists had their studios, and I think the first thing we did was that we all got together and talked about the exhibition. I also did individual visits, studio visits with each of them, where we talked about their work. We talked about the artist statements that they were writing for the exhibition. It was such a great immersive experience to spend the week with the artists and their work and their studios. It was such an exciting mix. I mean, it was artists from all around the world, so many different types of practice, and to see how those different practices kind of overlap, and then within the residency where people start doing creative works or ideas flow from one to the next, it's really, really, really exciting. It was an experience where creativity is first, really, that kind of creative process. I think artists live in that practice in such a kind of intense way, though I'm a lot more used to working within sort of certain kinds of guidelines and formats and kind of conventional ways of doing things, and it's really fantastic to be with a group of people who are going to question all of those things. You know, for me to really take a different look at my own practice, which is writing. So I will be giving a talk at the museum in October. My goal with this is to look at the residency, this year's residency, 2025, as a piece of this 3 decades long history of Warpwood, a program that was founded originally to support wood turners. And through excavating these histories, I aim to show how this museum is part of this landscape of art and crafts organizations in Philadelphia that have supported artists in really unique ways.